GM, we are back. We took a week off. We're recharged. We're ready to go. And before we get to Chris, we just want to cover a couple of the fun things that we've got coming up. So first and foremost, we've got our Builders Club Community Choice Awards coming out real quick, up to $25K in rewards for our builders. So please make sure you're voting and participating in the incubator channels. We've had some fun Telegram updates. We're playing with those behind the scenes, so be on the lookout for that. And we've got some fun things getting ready to be announced for our coming Art Basel, which is on the 1st of December from 4 to 8 p.m. More details are coming out about that, and we're scheduling our town hall shortly. Along those lines, we have a Black Friday teaser coming out pretty soon, so please be attentive to both the Twitter and the Telegram to make sure you're getting all the latest on that. And lastly, we dropped our interview with Bobby Hundreds this morning, so please subscribe to the Crypto Podcast Goods wherever you listen to your podcast, and we'll make sure that we are getting all of your wonderful questions teed up for our next guest. So our next guest, and if you're a part of the CPG community, it shouldn't be a long intro in that you probably have this app. You've probably been asking folks for admission to this app. But Chris Maddern is the founder of Floor, and we are very excited to have him today at our Builders Club on our Genius Call. So Chris, thank you so much for coming on, and welcome to the Club CPG Genius Call. How's things going?
GM, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here with you. Love the pump up music. I was like backstage, ready to go.
Excellent. Well, let's start with a couple of quick things. You were a Web2 business, and then you started moving into Web3. You started with Button. Can you give us some updates or some background on some of your history that's relevant for our builders to this point, and we'll go from there.
Sure, yeah. I'm a career technologist, so computer scientist by discipline. Spent the first 10 years of my career somewhere between kind of engineering management, and then found product as kind of my home as time went on. And so got really lucky, have gotten to work on a couple products that both people have loved and that I've gotten to see what scaling a product looks like. So I joined Venmo when it was a pretty small team and got to see that grow from a very small number of users where everyone thought you were trying to scam them through to a very large number of users where when you suggested that maybe they didn't know what Venmo was, they got upset that you were trying to talk down to them, which is like a really cool journey to get to go on. Left Venmo, started a B2B marketing business called Button. This was right around when mobile commerce was becoming a thing. And so our belief was that ads could not be the prevailing business model of mobile. Unfortunately, we were wrong. But in doing so, we actually built a lot of the kind of attribution technology and deep linking technology that went on to power the marketing programs for some of the biggest brands like Uber and Walmart and hotels.com and folks like that. So another really fun and really interesting journey. And one of the things I think is really interesting about B2B enterprise marketing is I think it's in many ways more analogous to building in a Web3 environment than maybe like consumer social was in Web2, because you actually care about your customers. They have interests, you have aligned interests, and you're listening to them. Which, if you look at the model of business of product development inside of most kind of consumer Web2 businesses like a Facebook, like users are really just the collateral damage of your experimentation, not things to always be taken seriously, and they're certainly not partners in product development.
I think this building in public is something we really want to dive into more. And I think the parallels that you have for your experiences now and how you've transitioned into Web3. And I don't know that following into Web3, I mean, the web is the web and we're just using new technologies, but what's some of those differences between building at Button and building Floor?
Yeah, it's a lot more fun. So I think there's like a whole bunch of different ways to cut that. So, there's building for a new small thing versus like building for a large enterprise thing. Like there are hundreds of millions of users who are impacted by what we did. And so, there's just lots of freedoms you get by having a relatively small number of users But like the really big differences come in how we're building. And so Floor was originally a small project that had a group of NFT holders who were like there with us, helping define the roadmap, helping define the mission, helping define what came next. And in doing so, you create this like really special thing. And like Floor, I actually wasn't necessarily 100% convinced, and I hadn't found kind of my thesis on NFTs when I started building Floor. And building Floor was what built it for me. When you get a group of people together and you align their interests and incentives and you allow them to be part of something that they're excited about, as opposed to just watching it and being a user of it or paying for it and being a customer, really magical and special things happen. And so, both in unstructured ways, like we have open chat in the Discord and we're constantly talking to users, through to more structured ways, like bringing folks in, literally hiring them. 9 of the 11 people who work at Floor now came directly from the community, were users first, and now are helping us to build the product. It's just wildly different. And whereas B2B enterprise marketing technology, probably all the way far on the other end of like, go and figure out what it's going to be, go talk to a bunch of customers, build it, build a whole marketing thing, like bring it to market, go talk to the media. We'll often just like have quick chats, throw something out, give it to 100 users, like see what happens. And then, as things work, roll it out further. There's a lot of flexibility and everyone's like very willing to help. So we have an early builds group in the Discord who we just like throw builds to first. And they're like, oh no, this thing broke and this thing broke. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry. Like, thanks for finding it for us. Or they'll get new features early and help us to test them. And within minutes of dropping builds, dozens to hundreds of people will go and try it out and just kind of help you try and make it better. It's really wild.
It really like reminds me so much of for folks that are not aware, like large tech companies do this like mandatory, and the dog fooding aspect of it is really a crucial component. Like you'll see the early days of like app development, which I think is fascinating. You had to have a beta program. Like TestFlight was originally not an Apple product. It was produced way ahead of Apple because it was a gap that was there where people couldn't test things and understand who could test them and when. Same thing with the Google Play Store. Like those features, you can get into lots of beta programs. I think what's really impressive is like you've taken that to the next level where instead of just having a link and having some random folks pulled through, you have this closed loop where you can really interact with the community. It's really beautiful to watch and really impressive to see the fervent base that's formed around Floor. I mean, I check it constantly. I think we have a lot of CPGers that are in there that are checking it. It's fun and it's beautiful. And yeah, I think we're really getting into this building in public. Is this a way that really comes naturally? It feels like you're sort of wanting to have this be the approach for a while. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And there's some other things in terms of, building in public and building with that roadmap. Like, how do you prevent roadmap leak, or how do you prevent things from going forward, or do you even care?
Yeah. So building in public started because I just didn't have anyone else to build with. It was just me, and then it was me and 100 friends. And there was just a much more rewarding way to build. And those people really helped us figure out what it is, helped me at the time, what then became us. And so it came really, really naturally, because otherwise, honestly, I'd have probably gone crazy and given up because I'd been by myself. Over time, what it means to build in public changes a lot as you go from, 1 person to 3 people to 5 people. There are other people to collaborate with who are full-time and who are in the room with you. And so that changes a little bit what it means to like build in public. Then you do start to get on to some like, oh, we're working on this big strategic thing. Do we want to talk about it? But, for the most part, we tell the entire team the same thing, which is our holders, our users, are our partners in building this thing. We'll act with trust first. And, honestly, there's nothing that anyone's doing right now that is such a genius idea that if anyone else had it, you don't stand a chance at winning. our belief is that if we bring everyone along with us and we build a movement, not just a product, and if we focus on executing and building great stuff in partnership with those users, like we'll win in the long term. I'm not super concerned about other folks knowing what we're building.
100%. It's this Web3 way of building is a way that, I mean, it's existed, right? Like Linux has had collaboration from the beginning, and open source technologies have this way of like bringing together folks. Like, IETF existed in this sort of same capacity for a very long time. And I think as Web3 became the ownership component and people really getting interested in the stakes that are, that are pretty much presented in front of us are pretty important. This has been a really fun way to pivot what would have been a Web 2, like lock it down, proprietary way of building, to pivot it out into the open. We're going to shift a little bit in terms of gears of like the early days, to like, because how you've gotten there. Again, if folks don't know what Floor is, they should check it out for sure. There's Discords and links, and if you are on TestFlight or Google, you can get to it. So how did you pick like your first PFP, and how do you think that the Floor app will help others? And I mean, it all started with like this tweet. Can you talk about the tweet that you made?
Yeah. So the tweet really started with, this was just a thing to do. So I was getting into NFTs myself. I bought my first couple NFTs. I still didn't really get it, but I started getting a few NFTs, and I realized I had to have 4, 5, 6 OpenSea tabs open, and I was trying to like figure out what was going on. And I think at the same time, over the last 5 years before that, I'd gotten kind of further away from hands-on product development and like literally coding. And so I put the two things together, and I was like, I'm going to have a little project here. I want to build something that maybe would be useful for me, and maybe some other people would find it useful, and started hacking together something that's like, track your NFT portfolio. And so then I did what I often do. I was just like, hey, I'm doing this thing, and tweeted it out and got a ton of responses. I think over 1 million people saw it, thousands of people DM'd asking for access to it. There really wasn't a thing yet. It was just an idea and a little wireframe. And that, I think there's kind of a series of things that happened along the way that just kind of reinforced this idea that people wanted it and were interested in it, and it was kind of worth pursuing and continuing. That was the very first one, when people saw the picture and was like, yes, I want that thing. I have this problem. Number 2 was when we sold our first 500 Genesis NFTs. And we're like, holy shit, people are actually like willing to come along for this journey, be part of it, and spend their money on that. And then when we later started seeing the engagement numbers and how people were sticking around and opening the app 10 times a day and kind of checking in, that was when we realized, actually, no, it's not just interest. Like, we're actually solving a problem for people today. So that was kind of that journey over the first few months. In terms of my first PFP, I actually forget what my PFP was before my original doodle. I think I did have one. It might have been a lazy lion. I don't know. That's actually a little bit embarrassing now I think about it. But I think for me, like I probably at the time followed that really silly thesis that people seem to have, which is your most expensive PFP is your Twitter PFP, which I don't really subscribe to anymore. I use my Doodle a lot because I really like Doodles. I think it's like a really nice, friendly, approachable brand. It's obviously not a cheap asset, but by far not one of the most expensive out there. And yeah, I think PFPs are really interesting because it is very intuitive to some people why you want one, and very not intuitive to others. And it's one of those moments that I think when you get over that hill, you're like, oh, it's this thing that kind of associates me with this group of people and this set of values that I'm interested in, and like can have this representation that I choose to present to the world. I think it's a really powerful thing, and I think it's one of the things that can make people feel a lot deeper and closer to Web3. And that's something that we're really interested in exploring in Floor as we think about onboarding 1 million new people. I think there'll be a lot of different reasons that people onboard to the world. Some of them will just want exposure to the asset class. Some of them will be interested in that kind of metaverse representation, PFP. Others will be looking for communities to join. Others will look for like very specific utility, and kind of helping people go through that journey and figure out how do they get started in Web3 based on what their goals are. I think it's going to be a really fun problem to solve over the next 6 months, 12 months.
Bring on the normies for sure. I definitely feel that we've lurched forward in that capacity in the space with a lot of larger Web2 brands really paying attention to how to get folks on. And it generally, in my kind of view of it, is much more of the traditional like sign in with Facebook, Google, etc. And I think that leads me to like the next part of the question about Floor is you've taken a very different approach on how to get folks into the app and the app ecosystem. And you're effectively designed two things. You have this portfolio tracker, but you also have this tokenomic offering that people in the space get their head around. So I'm trying to improve not asking two questions. So just pick one of those and tell us what you're most interested about in how you've meshed those together.
Yeah, I think there are lots of hard problems that we've had to solve along the way, and some of them you're solving, and others you just realize you're solving as you're solving them. And the NFT, honestly, when we first did it, wasn't some like super thought out grand plan. It was, we need to figure out some way of bringing a small number of people along. Thousands of people want to, get this app and be among the first testers. How do we just like kind of keep it sane, control it, be closer to those people, try and bring them along more, but have a small number of them? And so I actually tweeted again. I was like, hey, who would like think about buying an NFT for this? And again, got quite a few replies that said yes. And so we created the first generation of Floor tokens, which had kind of two main benefits. One was access to the app and to the team and the community that sat inside. And then the other was, it was in the middle of a bull market. And, I was personally at that point trading quite a lot. And so had access to a lot of allow lists and things like that. And so we're like, and we'll like give you allow list access to all the things that we're doing. And so I think that one of the most interesting, fun, but like at times hard things has been, you didn't realize up front that what you were designing was two things, a product and a tokenomics product. And so making sure that as we kind of evolve both of them, we keep them in step, and that we're always kind of building for the benefit of everybody. And that sometimes takes some thought.
For the builders that are listening now and will be listening, what was the split in terms of dedicated time that you set aside for both of those? Early days, you were doing this nights and weekends, and then you sort of like hit this inflection point where you're like, all right, we probably should go full tilt on this. What was the split that you had for like designing the tokenomics and the portfolio tracker? And then how have you, like, what signals were you like, okay, we can go full tilt on this?
Yeah. So I think early on, honestly, like everything was in let's do mode. And I think we got very lucky in that we made some sensible decisions and, never really tripped over anything too scary. And the market was, fairly kind and collaborative with us. I think at the beginning, 95/5. So like 95% of our time is focused on building the product, building the community. The tokenomics, like honestly, really weren't on our radar for the first month or two. We saw it as a gate, and users came in, great, they passed the gate. Now we can like focus on building value for them. I think as we thought about token generations, and we built Gen 2 and then Gen 3, and then in the future went on to build app passes, which were airdropped to Genesis holders, and like all of that. That's where it took quite a bit more thought to make sure that kind of we can satisfy both people's set of goals, like our goals around growing while we still remain partially token gated, but then users' goals of having kind of increased impact, ownership, and exposure, as well as not feeling diluted. And so there's definitely a lot of thought that went into that along the way. yeah, I think it's still like 85-15, 90-10 versus like 50-50. I think if tokenizing the project and bringing people together around it means you have to spend half of your time thinking about that, I think there's probably something a little wrong, and maybe it's just like not quite the right tool for you. And I think in our case, it's been, effort, but effort that we like putting in because it's effort for the people who've been with us for the journey.
Amazing. I have a ton of questions about Apple's latest announcements. We'll probably save those for a little bit later.
Yeah.
In terms of the Floor community and how you've been traversing to this point, like how would you describe the Floor community like as it is right now?
Yeah, so today the Floor community really means two things. There's the Floor kind of like Web3 capital C community, the group of people who sit in the Discord and hang out and chat and help us. And that's a small set of our overall token holders. So I think across all 5 generations of tokens, Floor is actually one of the largest holder communities that exists. I think there's 13,000 unique holders across all of those collections. And then a huge portion of those are daily active inside of our app. And so we have this like enormous community of folks who are holders, who sit inside of the app, who we can communicate with there, who we can serve content for, we can personalize for. But then there's this like really core set of Genesis token holders that have been here since the beginning, that sit in our Discord, are chatting all the time, are helping us shape the product, are like powering our alpha channel, our Degen dungeon, which is like where people just go like buy ridiculous numbers of crazy penny stock NFTs, and it like there's a lot of fun stuff that happens in there. So today, like the Discord group is like very much for those people who are interested in like having a home in Web3. Today I like to say like Web3 isn't really safe to travel by yourself. You need to like travel in a pack, and so everyone chooses an alpha group, and really that's about discovery and it's about trust and safety. And I think the whole purpose of Floor over the next, call it 6 months, is take some of those core principles that we see groups providing for each other inside of closed environments like a Discord, and figure out how to platform them so that tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people can get the same benefit, but inside of a more open platform, and one that you can dip in and out of without having to be a member of the Discord and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of the transition that we're trying to work on, bring that stuff to the app for everyone.
Fantastic. I'm going to do a quick PSA for the folks that are watching. We do have a POAP today, thanks to our team. So get your POAP app ready. It'll be the first part of it will be ready in about 4 minutes. So just make sure that that's happening. I want to transition a little bit to now how you built the team. Our builders, I think, watched your app be built and the rise of it. And so you have like how you built out the team, and then we'll get to some of the Series A and bear market kind of decision points that you made. Because I think that there's a lot of folks that are very fascinated about your thought process there. So when did you go full time, and like what was the trigger for it?
Yeah, so I think the full time kind of came as a function of three things. So one, we were growing quite quickly. We were actually making money. So I think we sold something like a little over $2 million of NFTs through the process. So like the project could fund itself. And really more than the money, I think just the fact that people were interested to that extent, and that was turning into like real active users was really exciting. At around the same time, I met Christine Brown, who is now my co-founder. At the time, she was running the Robinhood crypto business, and she was interested in acquiring Floor for Robinhood. And that was a big kind of powerful symbol for me, for sure. And then when I convinced her that instead of going to Robinhood, that she should leave and join me and build Floor together, that was definitely a forcing function, because now committing to building a team, and so like over the next couple months gradually transitioned out of Button and into building Floor full time.
Fantastic. So who were your first 2 hires? What were they? What was that like?
So depends how you count them. I think that technically the first three people at the company that weren't me were Christine, my co-founder CTO Sid, who I was also working with at the time, and then Patrick, who is our head of design. So it was like the four of us for a short period of time. But around the same time, we had this kind of explosion of contractors who were in the community, who were interested in helping out. We found like 3 or 4 of them who were actually like incredibly talented, and started trying to build systems to be able to get them involved and have them help. And until we got to the point of raising the round, a bunch of people were working part-time, nights and weekends, helping out. And then, when we raised the round, we just went and tapped them on the shoulder and said, like, hey, come on over, it's time.
Amazing. So you had some money that you had raised from the token sales. What was the thought process around going for venture money and a Series A? And how did you decide that?
Yeah, so the round officially was our seed round. There was definitely an aggressive seed round, but it was an interesting market at the time. And the way I think about this is I believe in Web3. And I believe that there will be a large consumer brand that emerges that introduces and kind of holds the hand of folks as they get interested in Web3 as soon as we get out of the other side of this bear market. And so I was thinking about raising money. It's twofold. One, these aren't trivial problems, and we needed a serious team to be able to go and take a swing at it. I think that this bear market, what we're just learning today, could be a non-trivially long bear market. Every time it looks like something good's happening, something 10 times worse finds a way of happening. It's been a fun time. And so we knew that we needed to give ourselves like 24 plus months of runway to make sure that, we can be here on the other side of it and really take advantage of it. And then, at the time, we did this right at the tail end of the bull. We actually did close the round in the bear market. And so everyone had the choice of whether to kind of go through with it, and everyone chose to. But in a market like that, it just made sense to go and raise the money and, be able to ensure that we'd have the opportunity to take the swing and be here when everyone comes back and we figure out what that next wave of Web3 is and help them get in and get oriented.
I think it's interesting you talk about like coming back, because I feel like I don't know that that's the most accurate way that I was thinking about it. And I have these like signals that I get kind of more daily. I kind of feel like we're gonna like mesh together. Like folks that are here are staying. Like you get GMs every morning. Those are the hardcore folks on Twitter that are hanging out. And then you get the flip side of like, I went the other night to a San Jose Sharks game. And at the conclusion of the game, I was given an NFT that I was there. And it was very low key. It was just through my email. It's a real NFT. And so I feel like those instances of people being able to interact with larger brands, more and more these wedges of getting folks interested in what an NFT will do. Eventually it'll just be like, oh yeah, I have NFTs. I was given them, and then I went and found these others. It's a fascinating time to be in this particular winter of NFTs, because I don't know that we've had an NFT winter. We've had a couple of crypto winters. This one is certainly interesting.
Yeah, I think we have a winter for the pictures of monkeys on the blockchain market. Who knows if that comes back in the way that it did? I don't think pictures on the blockchain will come back to the volumes and prices that they were at before, unless we find kind of significant new value for them. But to your point, yeah, NFTs as kind of a share of attention, I think are still quite depressed right now, even though there are some interesting brand activations. But I do think there are things that will happen over the next 12 months that will rocket the attention on NFTs, even if those actually aren't financial assets, even if those are, memberships, clubs, mementos of things, access, like whatever those kind of use cases are. I think those will explode, and with it will come back a lot of attention. and we'll return to kind of, if you just look at Google Trends, the kind of public interest in NFTs as a concept is massively depressed to, where it was September, October last year.
100%. I'm going to take this minute now to talk about our POAP. So you can get your Chris Maddern POAP. The secret word in the secret word part of the app is, there's no spaces, but it's floor go up. So FLOORGOUP, floor go up. That is your secret word to redeem your Chris Maddern POAP for participating in the Genius Call. We're going to open it up to questions as well soon. So folks, start getting your questions lined up, and we'll relay them to Chris. And we've also got a bunch more questions here. I have to give a quick also shout out to Chad and Janet and the mods team, who do a fantastic job both corralling all of the questions. Janet does a ton of great research and shares it ahead of time. Chad was putting in feature requests to Chris ahead of the call as I was getting my situation going. So big thanks to the team there. But we'll shift back to some of the more long-term thoughts on Floor and the app ecosystem. I personally have a lot of interest in web apps versus native apps. And I think this is for folks that have been building in the space for a while. Web apps and dApps were kind of synonymous with each other. And now, and I think one of the things your app particularly does well is using TestFlight to keep pushing the edge of what you want to do in a native experience on your phone. There's not a ton of Web3 apps that do that, and especially not a lot do it well. And then you've got Apple kind of like barreling in the past couple of weeks with changes to their stance on crypto and token gating. And I would want, I guess the first question I'd have is like, what are your thoughts on where the phone app ecosystem needs to go for Web3 from now out into the next like 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, mobile's always been both hard because of kind of some of the technologies and the work that goes into building them, but also easy because you just think about what your users doing, where they are, and what they care about. Floor isn't the place that you do your NFT taxes. It's the place that when you're in the coffee shop, it's in your pocket and you can take it out and grab it. And very much like the iPhone became the world's most popular camera because it's the camera you have. I think it's the same thing with Floor. We may not be the most in-depth analysis product that there is, and we don't hope to be, but we want to be that front door. We want to be the first thing that you take out of your pocket and grab and say like, oh, what's up with NFTs right now? Whether that's looking at your portfolio, understanding what's happening inside of those communities, et cetera, et cetera. And so like, I think, regulatorily and kind of app store review guideline way, yeah, there's definitely growing up to do. Like Apple's taken a stance which does, I think, a couple of things. One, it makes clear that they know that a lot of digital purchases are going to go to NFTs, which is why it's worth them going and making sure that they get their 30% on that. And like, I think if you think about worst case for Apple makes about 70% of their money on people selling digital goods inside of games. That's actually a really compelling use case for NFTs. If people found and thought that there was a good workaround to the Apple 30%, and that was issuing them as NFTs on chain, like they would do that all day long because it's worth billions of dollars in the aggregate. And so, Apple wants to make sure they keep that. I think their stance is not necessarily the most thoughtful and the most evolved. I think in particular, it makes marketplace businesses really hard. And where, they've created carve-outs for more traditional marketplaces like eBay and Poshmark and things like that. They like very specifically didn't here for NFTs. And so for businesses like OpenSea, I think that's, very challenging. For us, it matters a little less. I think the future of token gating is definitely an interesting question. We've always been very upfront that at some point the app won't be token gated. The path to getting there and like all of the tokenomics that go into that are still in the works. But, token gating is a part of our journey if you're building a consumer social product, token gating it, adding friction to being able to get on board, eventually at scale doesn't make sense. And so at some point in time, that has to change.
How has the Apple announcement specifically made you rethink your roadmap for Floor?
So the first half of the new App Store guideline basically lists Floor's functionality and says, this is fine. So like showing people their own NFTs, showing them their friends' NFTs in a way that isn't like purchase driven is literally how I would describe Floor, in a very dry and boring way. And so like the core functionality of Floor is fine. I think, we're definitely exploring the token gating piece and what the path is. So we've actually moved recently to an invite system that's on Polygon. They're non-transferable, they're not purchasable NFTs. And it's basically just an on-chain invite list at this point. And so we're exploring with Apple whether that's actually okay. And if they say yes, great. If they say no, fine. Like we'll just move it off the blockchain database onto a boring Postgres database. Like it's all really just semantics at this point. So I think that as you think about business models, I think transactionality in iOS for NFTs is going to be challenging for a while. I think they're going to be really slow to do that. I could imagine them building an entire line of business around this. I can imagine them actually being a platform for NFTs, for helping people create tradable digital goods, for creating a marketplace and a marketplace layer that people can use inside of apps. Apple's just very rarely first to move. They typically try to lag, but then do it better. I could imagine, though, a world where Apple actually becomes instrumental, but I think that's in 2 to 3 years, not like WWDC this year.
Understood. The way I've thought about it as well, and it's amazing that you're having those great conversations with Polygon and Apple around it, is like, well, you can have the creators of themselves of the app pay the subscription fee to you that you pass along your 30%, and you can have the users also pay a subscription fee, and that effectively unlocks most of the other features you want. Fortunately, like degens that are here are like, if you priced it right, it's kind of like, okay, I get to keep doing what I do and I get to build this app better, and the revenue goes through, so you can push it into a state of a monthly subscription, and eventually, like right. I think you will, they'll just merge them together. That's the approach on the other gig I've got, where like, yeah, we're just gonna turn on subscriptions and pay the VIG and never forget that they did this, but keep it going.
Yeah, like we've talked to them about that. We've also talked to them about just straight up selling the NFT through an app purchase. Like there's nothing saying we can't do that. It's a digital good. It's honestly like this whole thing is just a place I want to spend as little time and attention on as possible, because it doesn't create any value for our users.
100%. It creates some business challenges. That's mostly what we're trying to get through to our builders here, because there's a bunch of folks that have been looking at it as well. So longer term, and then we're going to open it up. We have a couple of questions teed up. Again, the POAP redemption is Floor go up, and so you've built a product for customers who exist, people who love NFTs. At what point do you see the normies and the newbies in the NFT space kind of really adopting it? What's your view of, like, I think you've alluded to it kind of broadly in certain time horizons, but what's your more established thought on that?
Yeah, it's honestly one of the main bets you have to make, right? Because the way to use a builder's market, which I think a bear is to make sure that when you get to the other side and things get better and people want to come in, that you've built the set of things during that time that make you uniquely able to make those people coming in more successful, to keep them on your product, and to create value for new creators that are coming into the space during that time. That trades off with, if there are no new people to onboard because there's no interest, then all the work you do to that is complete waste until it's not. And so we're very much approaching this quarter by quarter. I think everything that we do long term is just around helping you understand your NFT in the world of NFTs better. And I fundamentally believe that that's the same stuff that is going to eventually help us, onboard and orient a larger set of people. But right now, we're still very much focused on how do we make the most friendly, understandable, welcoming version of a Web3 portfolio tracker and kind of discovery tool that the people who are here can get benefit from. And I think what will probably happen over the next 2 quarters is we'll start to gradually orient that more and more. And I think realistically, we're not going to be looking at a bull market before next summer. I find that very, very hard to believe. We'll keep learning things though, and I don't know what the end of next year looks like. If the end of next year still looks like a really bad bear, that's when things start to get a little bit scary. But we'll see. So right now, still very much focused on just making sure we're building for customers here, but building things that play into that long-term vision of how do we help more people understand this world more. Turns out helping people understand stuff is quite transferable.
100%. I love the approach and the answer. There's certainly a lot of uncertainty, but in the macro sense, but I think, like you've said, what you want to do with Floor and how you want to move it forward, and staying focused on that is where you'll be. We have a question from Scott Williams, and he'd like to know the impact that the app pass has had on your acquisition beyond the pass. And then we have a question we'll ask about your origin story with LinkStyle, but how has that impacted your both growth and your thought process?
So there's now, I want to say 13,000 app passes, the vast majority of which, I think 9,500 of which went to Genesis holders. And so the net effect of that was about 2,800 Genesis holders who had 5,000-ish, 4,000 something Genesis tokens in total, got to pick the next, 5 to 10,000 people who got the opportunity to get access to Floor. And that was a piece of it that we were really excited about. Access to the app pass was kind of rooted in Genesis. We also used those app passes to drive a number of partnerships. So another, call it 4,000 maybe of those, 3,500, something like that, went to partner communities like Doodles and Moonbirds and Proof and Jimpers and BFF and Hug, in order to expand our community into these communities, welcome them in, bring them on as users, but also kind of establish long-term partnerships with these communities. There were lots of pros and cons to the app pass. So the app pass was actually designed as an on-chain invite and waitlist system. We ended up never using the waitlist on the app pass because we just kind of kept letting people in and scaling it. Of the 8,500-ish tokens that we dropped to Genesis holders, amazingly, I think 5,500 of them were free transferred to their friends in order to just use it as an invite. The unfortunate part of that is it costs every single one of them gas. So the app pass program probably in aggregate costs the Floor community $20,000-$30,000 in gas fees to move these tokens around, which kind of sucked. And we had some programs. We had an ambassador program for people who wanted to share lots of tokens, and so we did some things to make that better. So we've actually shut the app pass down at this point. And we've moved to a Polygon-based invite system. And so app invites are non-transferable 721s that essentially tag a wallet for having access. They can be sent without signing a transaction from directly inside of the app. And they cost no gas. On the back end, we pay the gas and airdrop the token. We work with OpenSea to make sure that the collection was allow listed so that it doesn't get thrown away as kind of a bad airdrop. And so that's the go forward strategy. And then, now, we created a bunch of new supply. For the most part, that supply was all gifted. A small single digit percentage of those tokens did make their way to secondary. And that was definitely a large new supply. And so even though it's a very small percent, that market's now gradually cleaning itself up. And so I expect that to probably support prices pretty soon, now that there aren't new transferable assets. I think that probably covers most of what you were thinking about. There's also some really interesting waitlist dynamics in the Polygon invite system that we'll probably be enabling pretty soon.
Amazing. So actually, I'm wearing my Polygon swag shirt.
Oh, nice.
I'm a very big fan of that layer 2 ecosystem and what they've been doing going forward. So shout out to Polygon for sure. We have another question from Tyler Phillips, and then I would like to circle back to the Links DAO as well. So Floor has a pretty great track record through its partnership program. I was wondering if you could expand about like the criteria you're looking for when considering projects and what you were looking for in that initial one. And if there's, Tyler also asked if there's any way for people to get in touch from the Pop Builders incubator community of the folks that are building there.
Yeah, so anyone who comes through Pop, we can figure out some more formal way to do this, but we'd be super happy to take intros of anyone that Pop's working with. So in terms of what we look for, there's both a bunch of structured stuff here. So we do KYC on people. We work very closely with them on their launch strategy. We do contract review. Like there's a lot of kind of like formal stuff that we do to make sure, these people are smart, they mean well, they have a plan, they're not going to rug people, like that kind of stuff. And then there's the softer stuff, like, do we believe in these people? Would I personally put my money behind it? Would our team be excited to invest? And typically we'll, particularly for the big ones like the Creeps and the R Planets and things like that, we'll have spent probably dozens of hours with those teams ahead of time. Like there are lots of other types of partnerships that we do. So we have a concept of floor finds, which is essentially community sourced alpha, where we provide incentives if folks bring collections that end up minting out and creating positive value for the community. So anyone who brings something to floor finds that mints out and holds a floor price above mint for some period of time, I forget what it is, will get a Gen 3 token, which is something. And so there's definitely like a range of things, but in the high end, and certainly the things that have now created tens of millions of dollars of value for floor holders, we tend to be pretty involved and try and get to know them pretty well. And shout out to Zach, who does honestly most of that hard work.
Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about Links DAO and how you got started there and involved there. And it's a pretty amazing DAO. And so for the folks that don't know, give us an elevator on Links DAO and then how you got involved.
Creating a tokenized model to buy and build the future of golf clubs. I am not a golfer, amusingly. And so Mike and I really kind of grabbed hold of this idea that he came up with, that we were riffing on. And honestly, a big part of it was just proving it's possible. And so I think, starting to talk to lawyers, starting to figure out the smart contract piece, make sure that we could actually keep a site up for 24 hours where we were going to drive $12 million of primary sales in an hour or two. It was a really fun technical challenge. So it came together in 18 days. I think the really amazing thing that Links DAO has done is it's gone from an idea, a concept, kind of a proof of concept and a group of people who had incredible passion to now building a professional team around that, like Jim Daly and Bez, Greg Hill, those guys, Cooper on the community side, they're really, really good and they really care about what they do. And now they're building this awesome organization and a mission driven collaboration between the community and this company in order to go and really do the thing. And I'm really excited and proud that I think they're actually they're going to buy a golf course, and that's awesome. It's super fun, and I'll probably learn to play golf on that golf course.
Fantastic. So we've got about 7 minutes left. We keep getting the questions that are coming through. This is where we ask for the alpha. What is both your own personal insights on the larger NFT community, but also what are some things that people should be excited about for Floor?
Oh man. So NFTs occupy this really interesting space at the intersection of culture and money. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And when I started my career at Venmo, I think like we were building one of the first interesting products at the intersection of culture and money inside of Web2. And I think there's like all these incredible things to be built inside of Web3 for this. Like those things are inherently social. And I think that honestly, the way that we interact with Web3 today is through tools, which really are just kind of products or like software that wraps the abstractions of the blockchain and kind of the underlying protocols. And I think we're going to see some way more interesting takes on how people should engage with and engage around tokenized content. And I think including in Floor, Floor is always and like has always been on a path to being a social product, because NFTs are inherently social. They're built around and on and inside of communities. You trade together with people. You gain trust and safety with the people that also did things. You follow people who have kind of more depth in the space than you have. And so like for Floor, but also just for, I think, anything that's successful over the next couple of years, it's going to be how do you put that token and that community like closer together in a more native way to create interesting things. And we have some really fun ideas, so watch out for that in Floor. I think a lot of people are going to do really interesting stuff there.
Fantastic. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. Thank you so much for joining us. I think the builders community will benefit tremendously from your insights and your experience that you shared here. We'd love for you to pop into the chat and see if other folks are available to ask questions a little bit later. Timing sometimes for live is a little bit tricky, and we get a lot of rewatches and folks will ask questions. I leave the last few minutes to you in terms of how you want to close this out and where you think Floor is going and what you want to see from our communities, and any advice that you can give to our builders community would be appreciated. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Of course. Well, thanks for having me. It's been super fun. And if anyone has any questions, always happy to answer and pop. I just realized I'm not actually in the main pop chat, so I'll try and figure out how to token gate into that in a little bit, because I do have a pop. In terms of advice, I think one of the things that I've always found hard in my career, and I'm trying really hard not to do it with Floor, is I think it's really easy to convince yourself of things and not go looking for data that contradicts it. And I think with Floor, I tried really, really hard to, even though our numbers are great and things are really shiny, kind of listen to that and like know that, oh shit, like people come back, that matters. It does matter to them. But ask that question of kind of why, and talk to them and understand what it is that they're doing there and what's making them successful. I've never ceased to be amazed by how often when you sit a customer down and you talk to them about what you think they're actually doing something completely different. And they're motivated in a different way than you thought they were. Like Web3 has a superpower in that your users are aligned with you and are part of something. They're not just users, they're partners in the process. Use that. I see too many people building communities and then giving them monthly announcements and doing nothing but that. And I think monthly announcements are great because not everyone is going to be there, listening and talking every day. But that like 5% of the community that sits in the middle, that's that kind of core that really cares and is really there with you and has the time and attention to do so, they can be a superpower. Make sure to use them, particularly as you're looking for fit. Use them and work with them to find that fit. That's what's worked for us anyway.
Amazing. Data wins.
Thanks for having me, Mikey.
Well, I look forward to having you back on. We'll keep getting the Floor updates and insights from builders and for builders. So thank you. If you haven't redeemed that POAP, Floor go up, no spaces, is the password. I'm glad you chuckle at it. I thought it was a rather clever one when I came up with this. That's what we want to see. Floors go up. Got 2 minutes left to redeem that POAP. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you next week with our next POAP. This podcast will drop soon. Keep listening to the Twitter feeds and in the Telegram, and we'll get all of the information out to you when you need it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Ben.